In my sourdough, about 2 tablespoons. I think it helps preserve it and gives it a little better flavor. I like to make loaves ahead of time and freeze them. I bought this lame, or this knife for scoring the top, online. This is my starter. It has the consistency of a thick pancake batter. I keep that in the fridge. I use unbleached flour. I use a scale to weigh everything. It keeps it more consistent. I zero the scale and I start off with 190 grams of water, lukewarm water. 190 grams. Next, I take kosher salt. I zero my scale. And I put in 17 grams of salt for this recipe. You see how convenient it is to be able to measure things. Next, I take 2 tablespoons of butter and I melt it in the microwave. I guess you can't see that. And I drop that into my water. And then I swirl that around to mix it. The next step is I put this container back on the scale and zero it. Then I take my starter and I mix in 450 grams of starter. And this is a recipe that'll work in this 3-quart cast iron, enamel covered, or it could be just cast iron, wherever you can get it the least expensive. I guess they call this a Dutch oven. So 450 grams of starter into this water. And then I like to mix this up with a spatula. So I just kind of slowly mix it. It tends to want to splash out. So just enough to kind of get the gooey, viscous starter mixed in with the fluid, the water, the salt, and the butter. And I use butter because I read that it works as a preservative, and I find that my loaves don't develop mold on them as soon with butter integrated as they would without. So that's how that came about. Next thing I do is zero my scale again, and I'll take a large sourdough pretzel container, and I'll zero my scale again, and I'll add 525 grams of flour. And this is just the amounts that I think work for this 3-quart Dutch oven. 525 grams of flour. And I think if you want consistency, and I think it's easier by having a food scale than measuring stuff. It's just, and then I'll incorporate that flour together. And again, just go slow here because the flour wants to kind of pop out. Now this bread dough has been sitting here for about 15 minutes and it's starting to kind of grow a little bit and spread out. And you'll notice it's a lot softer when it comes off this time. And so you can, again, you'll see it's got some kind of heft to it. It's starting to kind of act like the yeast is starting to work. So I do a stretch and fold again, out to there, stretch out to there, stretch out to there, and then finally to here. And then again, I'll cup it under me. And there's one more technique I'll try to share with you. You basically want to kind of tighten this upper skin by cupping it and rolling it towards you. It's kind of hard to see. Maybe I can do it here, I don't know. You cup and you pull it towards you, and so that this other side is rolling under. But that may take some time to learn. In the meantime, you can pretty much do this technique where you're just pushing the underside and you're making the top. So I'm pushing with this finger under and this finger around, this finger under and this finger around, and I'm tightening up the bottom so that it looks like that. And I do this, I'll do it one more time. So I did one stretch and fold, 10 minute, one stretch and fold, 10 minute in between, and then a final stretch and fold. And then we'll be ready to let it rise then for between 3 and 6 hours. And that's your window. I've done my 3 stretch and folds. And I'm going to shape this one more time. And then I'm going to use some kind of container, and this is the one I use. You can use something similar. It's just nice to be able to cover it on the top so it doesn't dry out. So I usually take about a half a teaspoon of flour and just drop it into this. And then I'll take this and drop it in there like that. And then I just actually put this plastic over it. And then I put a plate over it. And that's enough of a seal. And then I'll just let this sit for about 4 hours. We'll come back then. Okay, it's been about 4 or 5 hours and the dough has risen to that point. Let's see where it's at there. And so I like using a spatula. It's just handy to get this out of here. And typically what I'll do is I'll take out of here, I'll just take maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of flour, not much, and just kind of drop it in along here, along the edges, so that as I dig this out, it doesn't stick. And so then typically what I do is I try not to deflate it. I just kind of separate it from the walls, but try, if you can, to not deflate it. You want to keep it, you know, kind of inflated. It's going to try to go down, but do your best to keep it inflated. At this point, you can tip it out over here and it'll come out. And you can see that it's got air. You know, it's kind of been rising. It's kind of light looking. You can see that it's quite a bit bigger. And at this point, again, I do a stretch and fold. And sometimes if it's sticky, you'll need to put just a tiny bit of flour on your fingers, but don't overdo it. And then I'll take and do a stretch and fold. So I'll pull this out and bring it over, but I'm trying carefully not to deflate the loaf. And then I'll come around to this level and pull it out and over. And again, I'm just kind of being gentle with it. And over here. And then one more time here. And then I'll flip the loaf over. And this is where I try to get it I try to pull it and get it to kind of tighten up on the top. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm cupping my hands, I'm pulling down, and the back side is rolling under. So this top is getting tighter. Now you don't necessarily have to do that. You can work on that technique. You could also do it like this. But don't get crazy on the loaf this time because you don't want it to deflate. So I'm just going to wait maybe 10 minutes more, and then I'll show you the last step. This is what's also known as the second rise, and this should take about an hour, and then it'll be ready to go in the oven. So the point with this thing is you can start it in the morning if you're off, and then you can do your work throughout your day, whatever you got to do, then come back to it and finish it up 4 or 5 hours later. Now I'm gonna take this, it'll be a little sticky, so I'll put just a tiny bit of flour on my hands, just enough to kind of get it on my hands. I'm gonna slowly remove it from the board, and I'm gonna try again to do this rolling and tucking. Tuck and roll so that it's tightening this surface here. And I'll show you in a minute what the bottom looks like. And then it brings this all together. And then I'm gonna put about 2 tablespoons of flour right in here. This is a cloth lined banyan, it's called. You can order it on Amazon, it doesn't cost much. And then I'm gonna put this in here to rise for the last hour. And this makes it easy to get out of here when I'm done. And then I'm gonna put about 2 tablespoons of flour on top of it to give it a little bit more food for the yeast to eat. And then I'm gonna cover this. It's been cooking at 500 degrees for 30 minutes. Now we'll take a look at it. Hopefully this is where the magic happens. See, the loaf rose really nicely. Now I'll turn the temperature down to about 400. Leave the lid off for another, ooh, that was hot, 10 or 15 minutes.